Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Every night, Emily Parker heard muffled sobs coming from the upper floor of the Whitman mansion. At first, she thought it was her imagination, but the crying soon became regular, persistent, like a silent cry for help. The mansion, vast and luxurious, seemed empty despite its grandeur. The marble walls echoed with the sound of her footsteps as she carried out her chores as a housekeeper, but the sound of crying followed her everywhere. No one else seemed to notice. Not the servants, too accustomed to ignoring them, nor Madison's parents, always absent, preoccupied with their business and travels. Emily felt her heart clench. There was pure distress in those sobs, a silent cry that no one wanted to hear. She didn't know who was responsible, but one thing was clear: the little girl was not safe. Then, one evening, as she was passing through the hallway, Emily finally saw Madison's frail figure through a half-open door. Her eyes were red and puffy, her hair a mess, and the little girl was trembling on the bed. The sight of this absolute solitude made her heart ache. She understood that these tears were not just childish whims, they were a cry for help. And from that moment on, Emily knew nothing would ever be the same again. Emily Parker had always loved working in opulent homes. The Whitman mansion, with its white columns and manicured garden, was a dream setting, on the surface. At 23, she'd never had much luck in life, but this job offered a steady paycheck and the opportunity to learn the trade in a prestigious environment. Yet, from the very first days, something made her uneasy. Every evening, as she climbed the marble staircase to tidy the rooms on the upper floor, she heard faint sobs. Quiet at first, almost imperceptible, they became increasingly clear as she grew accustomed to the place. "That girl again," she murmured one evening, putting her rags on the cart. Emily had asked the other employees. The cook shrugged. The housekeeper pretended everything was fine. Her parents, meanwhile, were still away, too preoccupied with their travels and business. Yet the sound continued, a wail in the night that followed her everywhere. One evening, after cleaning the main hallway, Emily stopped by the bedroom door where the sobs were coming from. She took a deep breath and placed her hand on the handle. The air seemed thick with sadness. Gathering her courage, she opened the door a crack, and saw the girl's silhouette. Madison Whitman, barely 10 years old, was curled up on her bed. Her black hair fell in disarray over her shoulders, and her red eyes betrayed recent tears. Emily felt a shiver run through her. The little girl looked so fragile, so alone, so abandoned. "Hi," Emily whispered softly. I don't want to scare you." Madison looked up, frightened. For a moment, their eyes met, and Emily saw the fear and distress in the girl's gaze. She stepped back slightly. "No one ever comes, no one listens to me," Madison breathed. Emily felt her heart clench. Those simple words, yet filled with despair, awakened a protective feeling in her. She understood that these sobs were not simply childish whims, but a silent cry for help that no one wanted to hear. That night, as she silently cleaned the hallway, Emily made a decision: she would not leave Madison alone. No matter the obstacles, no matter the risks, something inside her knew this little girl needed her. And so began Emily's quiet vigil, one that would change her and Madison's lives forever. In the days that followed, Emily couldn't help but think about Madison every moment. Every time she passed by the girl's room, she heard those haunting sobs. But this time, she decided to do more than just watch from afar. She had to try to communicate, gently, without frightening the child. One afternoon, when the manor was quiet and the staff were busy elsewhere, Emily approached the room. She knocked lightly on the door, and after a moment's hesitation, Madison's timid voice answered. Who is there?" "It's me, Emily," she said softly. "I just wanted to talk for a bit." A heavy silence followed. Then, timidly, Madison opened the door just enough to reveal her tear-reddened face. "No one ever comes, no one wants to stay with me," she breathed. Emily felt her heart sink. She knelt down slightly to get to the girl's level and whispered. I'm here now, if you want, we can talk. Madison took a few steps back, wary. Her eyes betrayed fear and familiarity with being alone, but there was also a flicker of curiosity. Emily smiled at her softly, offering her kindness without demanding anything in return. Can you tell me your first name? Emily asked. Madison. Madison Whitman, the girl answered hesitantly. Emily nodded, as if the name had some special significance. I know it's not easy, but I'm here to listen to you, Madison. You can tell me what's making you sad. For the first time, Madison let out a louder sob, but this time it wasn't a solitary cry of distress. It was a sign of fragile trust. Emily gently reached out her hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Madison took it. The contact was light, but enough to create a bond. Nobody likes me here, nobody sees me. Madison whispered. Emily felt a lump form in her throat. She realized this wasn't just the loneliness of a spoiled child. It went much deeper. Madison seemed locked in an invisible prison, ignored by her parents and watched over by someone else, someone who caused her fear and pain. That evening, Emily left the mansion thinking about Madison more than ever. She knew this initial approach was only the beginning. It would take courage, patience, and perhaps even risks to protect this little girl. But one thing was certain, she would not let anyone, not even the Whitmans, ignore Madison's plight. And in her heart, Emily made a silent promise, she would watch over her, no matter what. As the days passed, Emily became increasingly attentive to the smallest details of the Whitman mansion. Every corner seemed perfect on the surface, sparkling chandeliers, immaculate Persian rugs, and antique paintings lined with precision on the walls. But behind this facade of wealth and order, Emily sensed a heavy, almost stifling atmosphere. While cleaning Madison's room one afternoon, she noticed things that deeply disturbed her. The girl had no toys, no books, no stuffed animals. The bed was clean but strictly minimalist, almost clinical. The sheets were sometimes stained, as if no one was paying attention to her during the night. Emily remembered Madison's words, "Nobody listens to me." Now she understood better. It wasn't just neglect, it was organized isolation, cruel control. Then, one evening, as she was walking down the hall, Emily saw a shadow through Madison's door. Someone had silently approached the room and seemed to be watching her. Before she could react, the figure disappeared around a corner. Emily felt a cold chill run down her spine. Someone was watching Madison. Questions swirled through her head. Who would want to harm a 10-year-old? Was it someone in the family, or that mysterious guardian Madison had spoken of? The staff remained distant. The cook pretended to know nothing, and the housekeeper smiled vaguely, as if everything was normal. Emily understood that no one would dare oppose the authority of Victor Malone, Madison's official guardian, a man whose reputation was silently feared by all. That night, Emily went to bed with her mind on alert. She knew something had to be done, but she had to proceed cautiously. Madison's safety depended on her discretion. She decided to begin carefully observing every move around the girl, noting any signs of abuse, and gradually getting closer to Madison to gain her trust. Emily realized then that this little girl wasn't just alone, she was in danger. And the determined housekeeper in her had just realized she could never look away. Madison's safety would now become her personal mission. After several days of observation and small attentions, Emily felt that Madison was beginning to trust her. She greeted her shyly in the hallway, accepted the small gifts left on her bed, and sometimes the little girl would smile before withdrawing into herself. One evening, when the mansion was plunged into a heavy silence, Emily decided to sit next to Madison's bed, without asking first. She simply offered her a cup of hot chocolate she had carefully prepared. The girl, hesitant, took it with her small, trembling hands. "Emily," Madison whispered after a long silence. Can I talk to you?" "Of course," Emily replied softly. "You can tell me anything." Madison took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on the chocolate in her hand. Then the words began to come out, fragile but sincere. "My guardian." Victor, he's always there, and he yells at me, he stops me from playing, from talking to anyone, and my parents, they never take care of me. No one listens to me. Emily felt a lump form in her throat. The girl spoke with painful honesty, and every word confirmed Emily's worst fears. Madison was suffering genuine emotional abuse, isolated and watched over by an adult who should have been protecting her. "I'm so sorry this happened," Emily said, gently placing a hand on Madison's. "It's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong." Madison looked up at her, and for the first time, there was a flicker of relief in her eyes. "Nobody believes this is happening to me, nobody knows," she breathed. Emily felt a new determination take hold of her. She understood that remaining passive was no longer an option. Madison needed an ally, a protector, and Emily would be that person. "Listen to me, Madison," Emily said firmly but gently. "I'm going to stay by your side. We're going to find a way to keep you safe. You're not alone anymore." The girl, trembling but comforted, snuggled against Emily for a moment. This simple yet trusting gesture sealed a silent pact between them. Emily knew she had just taken a crucial step. Madison had finally spoken. And with this confession came the responsibility to protect the girl at all costs. That night, Emily didn't sleep. She thought about how she could act without putting Madison in danger. She knew the road would be long and fraught, but one thing was certain, she wouldn't let anyone hurt this child. Emily knew she couldn't protect Madison alone. The Whitman mansion was immense, and Victor Malone, the guardian, was omnipresent and feared by the entire staff. To act, she would need allies, people she trusted who could help her without arousing suspicion. She began by discreetly observing the staff. Some seemed indifferent, accustomed to ignoring orders or the girl's distress. But one name caught her attention: James Collins, the groundskeeper, a man in his 40s, with a gentle face and attentive eyes. Unlike the others, he seemed to notice what was happening around him and had a calm and protective demeanor toward the children. One afternoon, Emily approached him while he was trimming the bushes in the garden. "James," she whispered. I think Madison is in danger. I can't handle her alone." James put down his tools and looked at her carefully. There was a silence, then he answered in a deep but reassuring voice. "I've known for a while. I never dared to intervene. But if you're ready to get involved, I'll follow you." It was the beginning of a quiet but strong alliance. Emily and James began exchanging information and developing small strategies to support Madison. They left encouraging notes and small gifts in her room, making sure she knew she wasn't alone. They observed Victor Malone from a distance, noting his movements and reactions, ready to anticipate his threats. The girl, though wary at first, began to smile again, a shy but genuine smile. Every small act of kindness from Emily and James strengthened her confidence. Emily felt then that their mission was becoming urgent, to protect Madison before Victor could do her more harm. For Emily, it was more than just a duty. She had discovered in Madison a fragile but luminous force, and she knew she would do anything to preserve that light. This unlikely alliance between the housekeeper and the gardener would soon become the secret bulwark that protected Madison from the darkness of her surroundings. But Emily sensed that danger was approaching, and that the time would come when decisive action would be required. Emily felt the situation was becoming more dangerous every day. Victor Malone, the guardian, seemed ever present, even when he wasn't visible. His orders were strict, his gaze heavy on the staff, and he knew how to maintain an atmosphere of fear in the manor. Emily had begun to notice the signs: a sudden silence when Victor approached, shifty glances from the servants, hushed whispers in the hallways. One evening, as she was leaving Madison's room after calming her down, Emily felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned quickly to find Victor Malone standing before her, his eyes cold and piercing. "Emily," he said coldly. "You spend a lot of time with Madison. Do you really think that's your role?" Emily felt her heart beat faster, but she kept calm. "I'm just doing my job," she replied softly but firmly. Victor smiled calculatingly. "Be careful. Here, everyone knows what they're allowed to do." Don't overstep the mark. He turned on his heel and disappeared into the shadows of the hallway. Emily knew this wasn't an empty threat. Victor was dangerous, and every move she made to help Madison had to be measured with caution. The next day she met James in the garden and told him about the incident. He's starting to get suspicious, she said. We have to be even more discreet. I know that, James replied. But we can't back down now. Madison needs us now more than ever. They began documenting every abuse and suspicious behavior from Victor, noting the times, words, and even minor humiliations inflicted on Madison. This evidence would be crucial if authorities ever needed to be alerted. Emily understood that danger was inevitably approaching. Every day spent in the mansion became a balancing act between protecting Madison and not attracting the Guardian's attention. But her resolve did not waver. She knew the time would come when she would have to act openly, and she wanted to be ready for that day. That night, Emily lay awake until dawn, listening to the sounds of the mansion and Madison's tired sighs. She promised herself that nothing and no one would break the fragile trust they had built. The fight for Madison's safety had only just begun. Emily knew that protecting Madison required more than just small gestures and attention. She needed tangible proof of Victor Malone's abuse, something irrefutable that would put an end to the girl's fear. One afternoon, taking advantage of a moment when the tutor was out for a meeting, Emily slipped into Victor's office. The files were neatly filed, and the room seemed impregnable. But Emily had keen instincts and iron patience. She discreetly searched drawers, cabinets, and shelves until her gaze fell on a dusty binder marked, Notes, Madison. With trembling hands, she opened the filing cabinet and discovered reports detailing every act of control, every punishment, and every humiliation inflicted on Madison. The documents revealed that Victor had a troubled past, other wealthy families had hired him to supervise their children, and similar complaints had been filed against him but never made public. Emily felt a mixture of anger and relief. This evidence, if used correctly, could finally protect Madison. But she had to proceed with caution. Victor was clever, manipulative, and if he ever discovered she had access to these documents, it would put both the girl and herself in immediate danger. She left the office with the binder hidden under her apron and joined James in the garden. Together, they reviewed the documents and devised a plan. They had to alert the proper authorities while protecting Madison and ensuring Victor didn't suspect anything. It's worse than I thought, James murmured. But now we have what we need. We can act. Emily nodded, her gaze determined. Every word in those files represented an injustice inflicted on Madison, and she knew they had to act quickly before the Guardian found a way to regain control. That night, Emily lay awake, rereading every page, carefully planning every step. She knew the decisive moment was approaching. For Madison, there was no turning back. The battle for her safety was about to begin, and Emily was willing to risk everything she had to protect the little girl. Emily and James knew the time had come. The evidence was in their hands, Madison's trust solidified, and Victor Malone was beginning to look increasingly suspicious. There was no time to waste. The girl's safety now depended on direct action. One evening, when the house was plunged into a heavy silence and Victor had temporarily left the mansion under the pretext of an urgent meeting, Emily quietly entered Madison's room. "Madison," she whispered. "It's time to get out of here. I'll protect you." The girl, initially frightened, sensed the determination and gentleness in Emily's voice. She nodded timidly, ready to trust this ally who had transformed her nights of fear into moments of comfort. Emily took Madison's hand, and together they quietly descended the back stairs, avoiding the main corridors where the lamplight might betray their presence. James was waiting for them outside, near the garden, with the car ready. "Everything's going to be okay," James murmured, his face tense but reassuring. "Hang in there, Madison." The car started slowly, then drove off into the night. Madison, huddled against Emily, felt a sense of security for the first time in a long time. The stars shone above them, and the cool wind brought a breath of freedom she had never known. They drove to a safe place, a secure apartment where trusted contacts could welcome Madison. Emily and James had taken care to prepare everything: clothes, toys, food, and above all, a space where the girl could feel protected and begin to heal from her trauma. Once they arrived, Madison collapsed onto the bed, exhausted but relieved. Her eyes were still shining with tears, but this time they were tinged with hope. "Thank you," she murmured. "I never thought someone would come and save me." Emily hugged her, her heart swelling with emotion. "You're not alone anymore, Madison. Never again." That night, as the girl finally slept peacefully, Emily and James planned their next steps: alert the authorities, secure the evidence, and ensure Victor Malone was arrested before he could do any more harm. For Madison, it was the beginning of a new life. For Emily and James, it was the beginning of a battle against injustice, a battle that would reveal the truth and protect the girl at all costs. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions and actions for Emily and James. With the evidence recovered from Victor Malone's office, they discreetly contacted social services and the police, explaining the situation and providing every document detailing Madison's abuse. The reaction was immediate. An investigation was launched, and authorities quickly intervened to secure the girl and protect the evidence. Victor Malone, surprised by the extent of the revelation, tried to obstruct the investigation, but the meticulous documentation of each abuse made any dispute impossible. Meanwhile, Madison began psychological counseling with specialists. The first few days were difficult. She spoke little, kept her distance, and sometimes painful memories plunged her back into fear. But with every discreet smile from Emily or every reassuring word from James, she regained confidence. When Victor was formally confronted by the police, Emily was present, but hidden in the shadows, watching the scene with a mixture of tension, relief, and pride. Victor, arrogant as ever, realized too late that he had underestimated the determination and vigilance of the housekeeper and the gardener. The evidence accumulated was overwhelming. "You can't," he stammered, trying to defend his actions. "The documents and testimony are clear," the detective replied. "You are accused of child abuse and gross neglect." Victor Malone's fall was swift. Madison, though fragile, realized she was finally safe. Her parents, shocked by the magnitude of the situation, realized they had almost lost their daughter because of their negligence and blind trust in her guardian. Emily, silent but attentive, watched Madison gradually regain her spontaneity and joy of life. Every burst of laughter, every gesture of curiosity and enthusiasm testified to the little girl's rebirth. "You're brave, Madison," Emily said one evening as they watched the girl play in the secure garden. "You've been through some horrible things, but you're still here." Madison looked up, and for the first time in a long time, her eyes reflected pure, genuine confidence. "Thank you, Emily, thank you for never giving up on me." This victory marked the end of a nightmare, but also the beginning of a new life. Emily and James had not only saved Madison, but they had also brought the truth to light, bringing justice to a long-ignored little girl. And as the sun set over the Whitman mansion, now empty of its oppressive shadows, Emily understood that her mission, though perilous, had been accomplished with courage and loyalty. The tension in the Montgomery household was now at its peak. The walls that had always held family secrets vibrated with a heavy atmosphere, ready to burst. Emily, the maid who had discovered Grace's pain, stood at the center of the conflict, between loyalty to her job and her visceral need for justice. The day before, Grace had dared to speak. Her words, fragile but powerful, still echoed in Emily's mind. "I can't live like this anymore. I want the truth to come out, even if everyone hates me." The next morning, as Richard Montgomery, the patriarch, prepared a speech for a grand reception with his business partners, Emily made a bold choice. She had warned Grace's mother, Evelyn, and discreetly summoned a lawyer specializing in the protection of minors, Jonathan Reed, a man known for his integrity. When Richard entered the main living room, impeccably dressed as usual, he found his daughter sitting beside her mother, pale but resolute. Emily, standing back, held Grace's gaze. "What's going on here?" Richard asked dryly. "The truth, Richard," Evelyn replied in a firm voice he no longer knew. "It's time to stop pretending." Grace trembled, but her voice didn't break. "Dad, you were never the father you claimed to be." I suffered in silence all these years. But now everyone will know. Richard's face tightened. At first incredulous, he tried to assert his authority as always. But this time, Evelyn didn't give in. Emily stepped forward and, holding a notebook she'd found in Grace's room, read passages from the girl's notes, her sleepless nights, her stifled tears, her anxieties described with heartbreaking precision. Then Master Reed spoke. "Mr. Montgomery, everything your daughter has written will be submitted to the appropriate authorities. Your name, your wealth, your connections will not erase what she has experienced." For the first time, Richard faltered. He tried to deny it, to accuse Emily of manipulating his daughter. But Grace stood, her eyes filled with courage. "You won't bully me anymore. You stole my childhood, but not my voice." The silence that followed was heavy, but it marked an irreversible shift. Richard understood that he had just lost his power, not only over his family, but over the image he had built all his life. The planned reception was cancelled. Instead of champagne and speeches, the house echoed with the murmurs of police officers and the footsteps of lawyers. The facade of respectability crumbled, revealing the hell that lurked beneath. Emily, with tears in her eyes, squeezed Grace's hand. "You are not alone anymore, my darling. You never will be again." The truth, finally revealed, freed Grace from an immense weight. And while the future remained uncertain, one certainty remained: the cycle of silence had just been broken.